Jorge Masvidal and Gilbert Burns. Big stakes in there as well. Is it though? Because Dana White declared Colby Covington as the #1 contender. Jorge Masvidal seems to think that he can kind of like he has some insider information, as he told George and Ghost from MMA Junkie Radio. But listen, big stakes in this matchup. Can Gamebred leapfrog Colby Covington? And can Gilbert Burns, with an impressive performance, leapfrog Colby Covington? What are your guys' thoughts? We'll start with Goes.
I mean, look, guys, we're in the wild, wild west here, right? Anything can happen at any time. That's kind of the standard the UFC's put out there. I guess we could start with Gilbert Burns. I mean, a win here. It's 2 in a row. Magny, Masvidal. So those are decent names, but that's not good enough. I can't blame him for trying. I can't blame either guy. If you look at Masvidal, all he's doing is breaking a streak, a losing streak, right? That's also not good enough. But nobody stays full on a 3-piece and a soda forever, right? There's unfinished business there. And boy, would the UFC love to give us that grudge match, right? So they'll probably do as much as they can to make something like that happen. But for something like that to happen, Masvidal can't just win his fight. He has to give us something similar to what he did to Ben Askren. And even then, the work is not done at that point. He's got to get on the mic. And that's almost just as important as what he did in the cage, right? He's got to get on the mic and he's got to sell everyone and get the crowd going. He's got to get Leon Edwards out of his seat, pissed off about what happened, right? But with all that said, I just feel like Dana White in this particular situation, he really dug his heels in deep on Colby Covington. And I think the pressure that he got from everyone when he said that, you know how he is, man. He just gets really stubborn. And I think no matter what these two guys do, I think it's going to be really, really hard for them to pass over Colby Covington.
Dan, what do you think? I mean, Leon Edwards seems to be very dismissive of Colby Covington. I don't want to fight him. And it seems like he wants to settle his beef with Jorge Masvidal. So do you see a big Masvidal win getting him that title shot?
It's weird because I sentiment with Goes where it's like, yeah, you have that in your back pocket. And, you mentioned it yourself, Fada. But the thing is, I think the UFC would have already made this fight or shown interest if they cared. Now, does that mean that they can't go back and use it at their convenience? Of course they can. They've done that before, but there is one thing we've seen Dana dig his heels about. And, you could say that it's a product of today that everything has to be a culture war or whatnot. But Dana White's kind of always had that attitude, irregardless of any political tie-ins, right? He kind of always has doubled down on the things like, really? Slap fighting? We're going to double down on this? Really? Uni Browning, to really pull a tough reference from over a decade ago on y'all. But the point is, right, and Colby Covington, you see these names. We joke about what is air quote marketable to the UFC, and there is a stereotype there. And Colby obviously probably checks that box as well. But there is a specific checkbox that Dana really checks off. And he really loves, again, Conor, obviously a much more successful bad boy seed. But he really, loves backing the proverbial bad boys or the proverbial bad thing if we're talking about his Dana White Power Slap League, right? So I don't think Dana is going to dig in here, not dig in here. It feels like he's already well dug in, and you can expect Colby to get that next shot, whether you like it or not.
And Mike, I mean, Sky Viziano, Daddy mentioned it was something I was talking about this morning. Gamebred hinted at retirement. I'm going to grab the exact quote. He said in the countdown, "This could be the last one. If I lose, I'm pretty much calling it quits. But a win against Gilbert Burns means that things are headed in the right direction. So if I roll the dice and do everything right, I'm going for it all." What do you think of Masvidal's comments here?
A little bit alarming, honestly, like to have him say that. I don't know how long ago, this countdown footage was shot, if he had a bad day in training or whatever the case may be that kind of sparked that quote. But to have him acknowledge something like that, to me, like I said, a little bit alarming. But he's also being real. I mean, you can't blame Jorge Masvidal too much. He's always been that. He's always given us, for the most part, his honest opinion, for better or worse. And he is right. I mean, in terms of title contention, like, it's completely done if this is the case. Like, even right now, the only reason we're even talking about him potentially leapfrogging Colby and all that is because he attacked Leon Edwards backstage at a UFC event. It's not because of his in-cage work. Like, there's a storyline here they can sell. We know that the UFC, likes to promote these types of things, and it's a good way to build a fight. But in terms of what he's done, like in the cage, he hasn't won a fight since 2019, and all the people that he beat on that, magical 2019 run, I don't even know if they're in the UFC anymore. At least, Ben Askren, Nate Diaz, Darren Till, all gone at this point. So like, he hasn't done much work over current ranked contenders at this point, but he can still get it if he does something spectacular and gets the shot. But if he loses, then we're looking at a whole different other venture. I mean, obviously all high level opponents, top 2-3 ranked welterweights, you're not knocking him on the level of competition, but there comes a point where you look at the record and you see so many, red ticks in a row besides the results for losses. And it's like, okay, you need at some point to win fights here. So for him at, I believe, 38 years old, has to go back to the drawing board. It's a huge one for him in Miami. Like, this is all the pressure on Jorge Masvidal in this moment, needing to get this win here and show that he can still be a contender. And him potentially stealing the Colby title shot at all is going to come down to the optics, how the fight plays out. Colby could get injured, Leon could get injured, things can change, so rapidly in this industry that I wouldn't say it's impossible, but certainly seems unlikely as the other guys laid out here as far as like what Dana White and the UFC's position is towards Colby Covington at this point. So I think the door is open for Masvidal to steal it. Certainly Leon Edwards and his team are going to push for it, but he can't just go out there and win a boring decision or something. It's going to need to be more than that.
And I'll add this, and we'll stick with you, Mike. I mean, Leon was kind of dismissive of Bilal Muhammad, who's someone who a lot of people think deserves a title shot, kind of dismissive of Colby Covington. So if Gilbert Burns wins here, do you guys think that Burns could get the title shot, or do you think Leon, maybe this is kind of part of the promotional thing and he will end up fighting Colby? We'll start with you, Mike.
I do think Gilbert Burns has a much harder upward climb, right? Like, he's going to need to, I say Masvidal needs to do something special. He needs to do something otherworldly to steal that shot. I mean, his 2 wins, like Masvidal and Neil Magny, those are good quality wins, right? Like, that's arguably better than Colby's resume right now, even though Colby's resume includes a win over Masvidal. But it's a tricky one for Gilbert. I mean, he's obviously an exceptional fighter. He can go out there and talk some trash and get you hyped up for a fight and stuff like that. But to jump over Colby Covington just seems very, very, very unlikely. I think it would take kind of an unforeseen circumstance, like I said, an injury, a suspension, an outside the cage issue or something that would take Colby out of the running. Then the whole landscape changes. But yeah, if it's doesn't end up being Colby and Burns wins this fight, I think, who knows what direction they go at that point. I think there could be a lot of different things. Maybe you're looking at like a Shavkat Rakhmonov or Bilal Muhammad does get it. But I feel like Gilbert's in a bit of a tricky spot here. It's going to take something, extremely, extremely special from him.
How about you, Goes? What do you think?
It's going to have to be miracle after miracle, because in the fight, he's got to do something tremendous. And then on top of that, we have to hope that a lot of puzzle pieces fall apart before we even get to Gilbert Burns, right? So yeah, a lot would have to happen for him to get that shot.
So Dan, is it safe to say maybe muddy waters at 170? Like, is there no clear-cut number 1 contender in your eyes?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I'm a big Bilal Muhammad fan. I'm a big fan of meritocracy, people, doing the work to get it. But the unfortunate part is we saw Bilal versus Shavkat. I think that no matter what Gilbert Burns does, even if he does blow him out of the water, I think we get that reverse narrative where we go, well, now all of a sudden they start highlighting those Masvidal points that we brought up as far as his winning streaks and potential relevancy, right? I honestly see Burns being used to, if they don't feel like Shavkat Rakhmonov is ready, whether he beats Bilal or if he doesn't, especially, I believe they keep Burns like the UFC loves to do with names like Burns, especially these Brazilian fighters, right? Who do a lot of the dirty work, man. They're the guys going over, facing all the undefeated Russians in those sketchy Russian promotions. Like, shout out to the Brazilian fighters, by the way. But I see them using him for a Shavkat or possibly anyone between Shavkat and Ian Gary as far as the prospect names. Again, it's not about numbers. It's not about rankings. It's about names. It's something my man Goes has been spouting off and telling you all from the MMA Junkie radio days for well over a decade. And I think that Ian Gary is a name that's further down the line, but don't even be surprised to see him when it's time for him to really get tested. I know they're giving him a nice step up in his next matchup, but beyond that, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ian Gary versus Gilbert Burns before we see Gilbert Burns get another shot at that title. And that's unfortunate.
Well, they're teammates, so I don't know if they'll do that.
Oh,
but
maybe that, maybe not that.
But I see where you're going.